Good evening, everyone. Good evening, good morning, and good afternoon, my sugar bears. It is I, Leo Brown, and I'm going to do something a little different today. So, first of all, happy Monday. I hope you guys are having a good Monday thus far. I wanted to give my thoughts on the recent documentary that was on HBO Max. If you haven't seen it yet, go check it out. There will be spoilers in this, okay? But I wanted to give my thoughts on the recent documentary entitled Call Me Miss Cleo about famous psychic and television personality, Yuri. I hope I'm saying her. No, Yuri Cleo Millie Harris. And I just wanted to give my thoughts on it. First of all, I have to say, before I go into that, thank you guys so much for liking, for supporting me, for subscribing to the channel, for leaving your comments. It really does mean a lot and it inspires me and pushes me to do more content, to provide more content for you guys. So thank you. So make sure to keep doing it. Make sure that you like, make sure that you comment, and make sure that most of all, you subscribe and become a sugar bear. It really does mean a lot to me. Forgive my my disheveled appearance. My shirt is so wrinkled. Lord have mercy. I didn't realize it was that wrinkled, child. But you know, I gotta rep Miss Shira, honey. I wanted to be her when I was a little boy, when I was a little girly boy growing up in Alabama. But that's a whole other story. Um, so I just wanted to really express my thoughts on the recent documentary. I have to say, I loved it. I loved it. I watched it actually twice because I wanted to get a really good, not feel, that's not the word I'm looking for, but I really wanted to really absorb the documentary. And I thought it was very well done. I love the fact that they interviewed her friends, they interviewed her partners, they interviewed people that were a part of her journey as a psychic, people that were like co-workers that she worked with, people that were part of the Psychic Readers Network. If you are a adult and you grew up in the 90s, you know about PRN. Actually, I worked for them, not in the beginning because I was in high school, but I worked for them, I believe, in 07 or '08, I think. Somewhere in there, 7 or '08, I think I worked for them, or a division of their hotline. And if you know anything about them, they had like I believe they were the same company that had like the Kenny Kingston line. They had the Latoya Jackson line, Walter Mercado line, may he rest in peace. So I'm going to go back a little bit about this, and then I'm going to include some things about the documentary, and then we'll move forward. So I'm going to go back a little bit on my journey. Um, for me, Miss Cleo is an inspiration. Call her what you want, say what you want about her, but Yuri Cleo Millie Harris is an inspiration. Number one, she's a Leo like me. Number two, we have practically the same birthdays. Her birthday is a day before me. I'm August 13th. She's August the 12th. She's a part of the GLBTQ community, as I am as well. And she started doing what I did. She started doing work, not as a joke, but kind of as a way to make extra money. And then it became a bit of a calling for her. And also, she pursued a career in the performing arts like I did. I wanted to be a singer, she wanted to be an actress. So I relate a lot to Cleo. And growing up, I'm not gonna be one of those people that's like, oh, I always had abilities. I'd like to think that. I'd like to think that I had abilities when I was a kid, but I didn't know that that's what they were called. Because growing up, and I've often said this, growing up in the deep south, growing up with conservative parents, or parent, I should say, we didn't call it that. We just call it, oh, you just touched or you gifted or whatever. You know what I mean? But like we didn't really call it psychic or what have you. So I remember it was like 1998 for me. And I remember like staying up late, and I'm a night owl to this day, especially during the darker half of the year. But staying up late and seeing the first Mind and Spirit commercial with her on it. And I just absolutely adored her. I just adored the way she spoke. I adored the fact that she was funny, she was charismatic, she was empathetic, she was for me, she was real. And I just loved her. Like I wanted to sit down and just talk with her like all day. I wanted to just, meet her and just be like, oh my God, I would love to meet you and just talk to you. And then I remember, I think it was in 2001 or either 2002, when she appeared on the Jenny Jones show. And I loved, when I tell you I ate it up, I was like, oh my God, because this was before like TiVo and where you could skip stuff. So I loved it, and I was like, oh my God, I just live for her. And I remember seeing her Keeping It Real book and her tarot deck at the time. Because around that time, for me, I had an interest in psychic phenomena. I've always had an interest actually in the psychic, spiritual, paranormal, that the metaphysical. Even as a kid, I used to call back in the 90s. I would call those hotlines. I remember actually one of the guys I spoke to. This was in 1997. And I remember I spoke to a guy. I had just come out of the closet. I think his name was Ramon. And he was Puerto Rican. He's a Puerto Rican man. And if anybody knows me, honey, I love my Boricuas. I love y'all. Shout out to y'all. And I remember him even saying, he was like, I don't believe in this stuff. Like I'm reading from a script. Like he literally said that. He was like, I'm reading from a script. Because they didn't record the calls. So he honestly would be like, I'm reading from a script, and I remember him being like, oh, you want to be like James Bond? Because I think he was like from New York. And he was like, oh, you want to be like James Bond or some shit. You want to be. And I was like, no. I was like, no, I'm gay, and I lied about my age. I said I think I was 17, but really I was 18, I think. I think that's what it was. Because in 97, I was 17. And I was like, no. And he was like, well, you shouldn't be that way, da da da. And long story short, I've always had a fascination. So for me, Miss Cleo was the first, alongside Walter Mercado. She was the first psychic of color I ever saw. For me, like, how now we're saying like representation matters and things like that. She represented that. And granted, now I'm gonna say this: was it performative? Of course it was, but Walter Mercado was too. But what they both represented for me was, okay, you got this gift and you can do something with it. And mind you, I didn't know that I had this ability until I was 18, 19, 19. No, 20. And that was, and I always tell this because it was my best friend who was like, I think this is what you're meant to do. So getting into the documentary. So in the documentary, they talk about how they start in Seattle, Washington. And I actually remember reading an article about this many, many years ago. And they talk about how she was an actress and she worked with the Langston Hughes Center of Performing Arts. And I have to say, honey, when I tell you those are some beautiful Black men and women, oh my God, the actors and the actresses. There was a guy, I think his name was Steve Sneed, I think that's what his name was. Hey, I mean, fine, fine. Like, I'm like, I need to go to Washington State for a minute, go to Seattle. And they were saying that Seattle has a thriving art scene, but Seattle has a small Black population, which I've actually heard. I've heard that to be true. And so in it, they talk about how she was a great actress and she would do voices and things like that. And she was just really great. So great that the director of the Langston Hughes Performing Arts Center invited her to do plays for a season. And she was supposed to do a play called For Women Only. And this is where we first meet the character of Miss Cleo. So, and mind you, let me make this very clear. This video will be long, so just deal with it. Okay. So, anywho, so she does her play in Seattle, but this is where it gets a little murky. So they didn't know where she was from, They thought that she was from like St. Louis or somewhere in Midwest. They had no clue. And they knew her as Uray, Uray, and Uray, they didn't know like Cleo. So they were like, okay. And so as she was about to do the play, she skipped town. She left. She owed, I think, like the people like thousands of dollars, and she left. And they never saw her again. The people at the Langston Hughes Performing Arts Center, and shout out to them for being so open and so candid. But they never saw her again after that. So fast forward, a couple of years later, she goes to Florida, Fort Lauderdale, I think it was. And so she goes to Florida, and she starts to work for the Psychic Readers Network, PRN. So she goes to work for them, and it was actually her sister-in-law who said, "Hey, you could probably do this, and make a little money, make some residual income." Now, mind you, and this is why I tell a little bit of my story too. When I first started doing readings, honestly, I didn't think that it would be, so I can relate to this because I didn't think that it would be a career. I really didn't. I didn't view it as an industry. I viewed it as my roommate came home one day with the copy of the Riverfront Times in his hand, and he was like, I think you should do this. And in the beginning, I did phone sex. Pick up the phone. If you remember those commercials, chances are you were calling me. So I did that, for 3 years. And then eventually I segued into doing phone psychic work. And I didn't view it then as what it is now for me. I didn't view it as a calling then. Because I was a kid. I was fresh out of college, just trying to make some money. But then fast forward a couple of years, and here we are. So kind of the same thing with her. She was like, okay, I'll do it. Why not? And so in that, people were trying to find out like what happened with her. Who is she? Who is this Uray person? Who is she? So in the documentary, they basically say that she was adopted. She came from a family of, I think, 8 or maybe 10. No, let me go back. Her mother gave her away, and her mother gave her away, and her mother um, was like, and they even said it in the documentary that it's not that her mother gave her away because she, at least from Miss Cleo's perspective, she looked at it like her mother did what she had to do. She didn't look at it like, oh, she gave me away and she didn't view it like that. She viewed it as my mother gave me away, and so now I'm an orphan. I don't have a family. So she ends up living with these people. She goes to Los Angeles, and because they say that in the documentary she was born in Jamaica, so she goes to Los Angeles as a little girl, and her mother gives her away to these people who also happen to be Jamaican. And in this house, there's like 8 to 10 kids, and it's all her. And they said that her childhood was very painful. There was a segment where in the documentary they say that she was molested when she was 11 years old. They talk about how she thought about ideation of unaliving herself at the age of 7. So as you can see, if you watch it, she really went through a lot, a lot of trauma. So then we go into her, we go back because they talk about her childhood a little bit because there wasn't really a lot known. But it turns out she went to an all-girls school. And there's actually in the documentary where there's clips, because there's a documentary, and I wish I need to find it. There's a documentary called Hotline where they interviewed her. And in the documentary, her friend says, well, actually, when they interviewed her, they filmed that interview in my house, in my living room. So they tell like when she's working for PRN before, and this was way before she became Miss Cleo. So when she's working for PRN, she was doing what others were doing. She was doing uh, she was working behind the scenes. She and this other guy, she and this friend, and he ended up becoming her friend and her set designer. So she worked for PRN behind the scenes for a year. She did readings. She was real. So she did readings. And one day they were like, okay, we had a spokeswoman at the time, but she was leaving. And I know who they're talking about. I think her name was either Joe or Bo. And I loved her because she was so sweet. Um, but she was leaving. They were trying to find a spokesperson that could, boost everything up, boost up the business. So so one day they bring in this white woman who, in my opinion, she looks like a lawyer. And she's just spouting off all this gibberish and da 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 and this and that. And so one day Cleo sees the commercial and she's like, what the fuck is this? What the fuck is this? Like, she don't know what she's doing. So she goes to the producers because, mind you, she had been working for PRN for a year as a reader herself. So she goes to the producers and she's like, listen, I used to act. Let me do this. And if you don't like it, fine. Like, if you don't like what I do, fine. But she volunteers and she's like, let me do it. So she goes and she does it. And she says, but I'm going to give you one. I'm gonna tell you one. I'm gonna tell you this one thing. Don't tell me how to read cards. Don't tell me what to say, because that's what it was too. In the beginning, they had done like a practice round. I forgot about that. They had done a practice thing with her, and they said it was so bad. Like, it sounded fake. It looked fake. It didn't feel right. Everything was staged. They hired actors. Like, it was just bad. And she said, listen. She said, just let me do me, and let the callers come in, and don't tell me how to do my job. Don't tell me how to read my cards. Don't tell me how to do shit. Just let me be me. And thus, that's how we got Miss Cleo. So what we saw growing up in the 90s and the early 2000s, what we saw late at night when she was sitting there and she was shuffling the deck and reading the cards, that wasn't fake. That was actually real. That was real shit. Like, she was talking to the clients on the phone. So and in it also, I forgot about this too. In the beginning of the documentary, they talk about her, and they talk about Cleo and how she really was very devoted to her belief system, her that she was a voodoo priestess, that she had an altar, that she meditated, that she really believed, and they said that she would, like, you wouldn't have to tell her anything. She would just clock you. Like, she just knew stuff. And there was one instance in the documentary where I think it was her godson, and he said that one of his fraternity brothers had come over, and she told the fraternity brother, she said, something's going to happen to you where you're going to be numb on the left side of your body. And she said it's going to be in 2 weeks. She was like, I don't know what it is, but something's going to happen. Turns out he ended up having a stroke. And oftentimes, as a reader myself, that's exactly how it works. That's exactly how it works. Sometimes you're not as specific as you'd like to be. So anyway, and he just talked about how gifted she was. So getting back to her becoming Miss Cleo. So she becomes Miss Cleo. She does the first infomercial that we see. And she didn't take it. She even said it because in the documentary, like I was saying earlier, they have clips of her on the Hotline documentary. So they have clips of her being interviewed, and she even said, she was like, I had no clue. She was like, it was an infomercial. I had no clue what it was gonna become, and it just blew up. Like, the ratings was through the roof, and thus her personality was born. So now we get into, she's becoming popular, she's doing these things, she's on TV, you see her everywhere. But now we get into the business end of the Psychic Readers Network. Now, if you know anything about back then and how they would do, right? They would often put for entertainment purposes only. And they interviewed I think he was the district attorney in Florida. They interviewed him, and he was like, I didn't want to go and crush the psychic business. I just wanted to, um, get things together because they were defrauding customers, the company. So they had all, and prior to this, they had 3 lawsuits done, and PRN had settled them. And so you had 2 people. It was Steve, and I believe his name was Mike. And they interviewed another woman who ended up being the whistleblower of the thing. And she was like, they didn't care about anything. All they cared about was money. And so here's how it would go. They would have operators from all over the world. The operators would log into a line, and then the line would call them, right? Which if you call any hotline now, whether it be Keen, whether it be Live Person, whether it be California Psychics, that's basically what they do now. They still do the same thing. So, but in this case, they didn't have any training. The readers were not readers. They actually read from a script. And I think her name was Barbara Millette. I think that was her name. And she was like, we were told to read from a script. She was like, we literally sat at a desk, like a call center, and we wore headsets. And they interviewed another woman who said the same thing. We wore headsets. She was like, I was allowed to use my actual name. And they wore headsets and they just talked from a script. They didn't know what they were doing. They didn't know that they were, reading cards and stuff. And so, you know how they say, well, your first 3 minutes are free. So during that time, during the first 3 minutes, what they would do is they would give people's names and addresses. So that way they could advertise and they could mail them flyers and things like that. Because how one of the women became another reader, her name was Spiritualist Julie. She became a reader because they had sent her a flyer in the mail. And she was like, you know what, why not? And so that's how she became an at-home reader. And like I said, this was back in the 90s when everybody had landlines. So they interviewed another guy, I think his name was Brett. And he said that, he would create characters. He created a character named Cassandra, who was a very Southern woman. She talked like this. And he went through the whole spiel. And he said nine times out of 10, the people really didn't call for psychic readings. They called for advice or just to have someone to listen to the problems, like a sounding board, which I'll be honest, as a reader myself, that is somewhat true. It depends on the person. Every reader, every customer is different. But I know that for me, that was a thing for me in the beginning. And one of the other readers, Spiritualist Julie, said that most people they would call for love or for money. So one of the things, one of the nicknames they called it was money or honey. So and I'm like, well, that is true. So here's how we get into the whole lawsuit thing. So what happens is because of you got a bunch of people calling these lines, and they're talking to these people who don't know what they're doing, who don't have a clue, right? And even a lot of them said like, I felt bad because, excuse me, I had read cards when I was a kid. But I had a woman call me and she was really going through it, and she paid like $100 on this call. Now, mind you, the operators who were doing the work for PRN, they were only getting paid 20 cents, 24 cents a minute. And trust me when I tell you, in the beginning of me doing phone psychic work, that's when I tell you it was you literally had to, and even Cleo said it, you had to drag out the call. The longer your hold times were, right? Your call times were. The more you drag the calls out, the more calls you got. If you didn't drag them out, if you truly wanted to help them and have them on their merry way, you made no money. But then the money you made was so small. It was so minute. So then the district attorney and the Federal Trade Commission step in because they're like, wait a minute, you're not only defrauding the customers, but you're defrauding the clients too. They're not getting paid fair wages. Um, you basically are, saying one thing, like you're saying this for entertainment purposes only, but then you're sending out threatening letters. You're billing people that didn't even call. Like that's what happened. So that's why that whole thing went down. Now here's where Miss Cleo comes in. Miss Cleo was the face of the company. She just received a salary. But here's the thing though, when you're the face of a company and say your company comes under fire, right? Guess where it falls on? It falls on you. So that's how she became known. Oh, well, you're a fraud, you fake, you phony, you this, you that. And so I think it was in 2002. Yeah, it was, because I actually remember this. It was in 2002, and they had finally arrested the founders of the company. Uh, and they arrested them, and they arrested them in St. Louis, I believe, because I think it was in St. Louis, because I remember being on the news. They arrested them in St. Louis, and by that morning, and then by dinner, they had posted bail and they were back in Florida. And they were good. And even Cleo said it. And it turns out how she got involved, how she got named in the lawsuit was they had documents with her name on it, with her signature, that she didn't even know they had until she got named in the lawsuit. So it wasn't it, so as much as people want to point the finger at her, it wasn't her fault. And it kind of reminds me of like if you guys have ever seen Boomerang, right? And you know where Eddie Murphy's like, well, Lady Eloise, Lady Eloise, Lady Eloise, and and Robin Givens is like, but she has no power. All of our decisions are made by the board of directors in Paris. And it was kind of like that with Cleo. Cleo didn't have any power. She was paid a salary, like to do the infomercials and stuff. But even in that, her contract, because she even said it herself when she met with the Federal Trade Commission, because the Federal Trade Commissioner, he actually said, I interviewed her, I spent time with her. She invited me to her house in Fort Lauderdale, and she showed me her contract, and she even said, I signed a really bad contract. And then they go back to an interview that she did, the hotline interview, and they're like, yeah. She's like, yeah. When I showed them my tax returns, they were stunned about how little money I had, because people thought that it was all her. Excuse me. It was all her defrauding the customers and stuff, when really it wasn't. It was these two white men who basically took a black woman's image, because that's the thing. She didn't have the rights to her image. She didn't have the rights to her name. Nothing. None of that. Like all the Miss Cleo tarot books, the Miss Cleo Keeping It Real book, the tarot, like all of that. She had no cause in that. None of that. She was just the face of the company. So she made no money. And they even said they actually, because the founders of the company, they declined to be interviewed for the documentary, but they reached out to PRN for comment, and they were like, well, yeah, she retained her own lawyers, and she didn't have any dealings with what went on with the Psychic Readers Network. It wasn't her, it was us. They pretty much admitted it in the documentary. So then we go a little bit and we talk about her after the whole lawsuit. And and actually her name was dropped from the suit. But because of that, she couldn't get any work. People didn't believe her. People thought she was a fake. People thought she was a fraud. Like they were saying, how like one of the persons said, one of her friends, they were like, just imagine if you can, before you even open your mouth, people see you as a fake. People see you as a phony. And she said that's what it was. And for a while, Cleo didn't come out of her house. She was a complete recluse. She lived in Florida still, but she just wasn't doing anything. And then I think it was in 2005, she met these friends, And they just started to like have Sunday barbecues and stuff. And then before they knew it, she started to slowly come out of her shell and she opened up a little bit. And I'm trying to, because there was so much in this documentary. Oh yes, and Raven Simone was in it too. And I love that Raven Simone was in it because it was actually, I loved her little parts in it because she was like, Cleo didn't get a bag. Cleo didn't have no money, you know. But see, it goes to show, and I'm digressing a little bit, but it goes to show how a lot of companies will prey, and this is all the way down from corporate America to, whatever. But a lot of companies prey on people not knowing the business end of a business. She knew it was a business, but she didn't know, like, what's the word I'm looking for? Like lawyers and things like that, representation. And she didn't have the backing that she should have had. And unfortunately, they prey on that. They prey on people being stupid. They prey on people being, naive. And being the fact that she was Black, being the fact that she was big, because she was a large girl. Cleo was not small, because she was big and tall. Being the fact that she was good at, she was charismatic. They basically, the company, I mean, they were like, well, you go ahead and go play, and we'll take care of the industry part. You just go ahead and be the face. And she got, which is unfortunate for her because I think it's sad. Because I think deep down, she really did want to help people, in my opinion. Um, but so they open up about her life. So fast forward to like 2005, 2006, and I actually remember this. She came out in Out magazine as a lesbian, and she had her kids, and they interviewed her girlfriend, her first girlfriend, which is she's now a transgendered man. Her name was Marianne, but now her name is Mark. And he said, he was like, "Oh my God, she was a great cook. She was funny. I loved her. It was wonderful. We had a great union. The reason why we broke up is because she just wanted that, like, now that she was out, and she just wanted to just do her thing and have fun. And so that happened. And then um, she meets a friend of hers. She meets a woman. I think her name was Anne Marie. I think that was her name. No, her name was Andy. She meets Andy, and Andy ends up becoming her makeup artist. And Andy's like, oh my gosh, she was so big. She was so larger than life. Like, you just couldn't take your eyes off her. And they end up becoming friends. And she ends up uh, kind of adopting Andy's kids. And Andy's kids end up becoming Cleo's godsons. And she ends up getting involved in the GLBTQ community in Florida and in Palm, in West Palm, I think. Was it West Palm? I think it was West Palm. I think. I'm not 100%. Don't quote me, but I think it was West Palm. Or like, that area in Broward County. And she ends up volunteering, and she's just doing her thing and just living her life. And she just started to come out of her shell. And it was just wonderful to see her evolution, her involvement with her community, her involvement with herself, because one of the things that they said, which in the documentary, which is true, is that often when you deal with trauma, you often find a side of self that helps you get through it and it grows. And I think that with Cleo, that's exactly what happened. They talked about how she had different energies, she had different entities that were being within her. She had a grandmotherly entity, she had a male entity that was the name of Max. And I honestly can understand this because I think, not only was she psychic and a healer and things, but she was also a channeler. And they said that, like, how it would wear her out, doing the work that she had to do. And she was like, I'm the vessel. And it was just, and I understood it. Like, I really understood it. But then on one hand, they were like, well, you probably could say that she might have had some mental health issues and, personality. But for me, I don't think it's always that. I think sometimes you channel energies and guides and things like that, and they become a part of you. But maybe she did have some of that. Who's to say? I don't know. maybe she did have some mental health issues. But um, then towards the end, we meet Lou. Lou was her last partner. She met Lou when Lou was 61. No, Lou was 60. She had just come out at 60. And that's the one thing I loved about this too, was that in the documentary, it also showed that you can find love at any age, that it's never too late. And she said she was at a coffee shop. She had walked to a coffee shop. And she walked in and she saw this beautiful woman. And she was like, I just couldn't take my eyes off her. And she said, I had no clue that she was Miss Cleo. And they ended up striking a conversation. And then before they knew it, they were dating. And she said that she honestly, you know, really changed my world. Like she really made me see that life is just a beautiful thing. And they were in love for many years. She said, I don't know what prompted our breakup, but she said before we knew it, we were living more like roommates than partners. And she said before I knew it, she moved out. But she said my life was forever changed by her. And it was just so nice to see her talk about it. And in it, she got teary, she got emotional. They all did, talking about Cleo. And one of the things that I saw too, when they interviewed the people in Seattle, and they interviewed this one author about the Caribbean diaspora, because one of the things that they were talking about was that, and he interviewed Deborah Wilson too, because they talked about the parodies, and Deborah Wilson is Miss Cleo, and even Deborah Wilson was like, but I think she gave you the truth. I think that's what people wanted, from her. But they were saying about how her Jamaican accent, like, was it real? Was it fake? Blah, blah, blah. Wow. And they were saying that how she kind of represented, in a sense, a mammy figure in a way, because she was big, she was large, but she was nurturing. And I can kind of see that. And I think for one of the things that one of the authors said in the piece was that as Black people, as African Americans, we often view, and Deborah Wilson said this too, we often view things from the Caribbean, things from Africa itself as old world. And when you think about it, that actually is true. Because if you look at even like Italians and how you have the stereotype of the Italian gypsy woman, right? A lot of Italians who don't know their culture, like, or know their history very well, they view it as like, oh my God, you're ancient. And I think it's the same way with us. We're getting better now. We're learning more about our history. But I think for a lot of people of color, not just Black people, we often view what we don't know as foreign. And I think that's why maybe she adopted that accent, because the woman who wrote I forgot her name, but the woman who wrote the book, she was like, I'm Jamaican and I know that that's not a real accent. But to somebody else, and this is where they interview her, because all her friends and stuff, they were all white. And they were like, to somebody else, you know, like a white person would be like, no, she's from Jamaica, da 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 da, but to Black people, it's like, okay, girl, that's cute, have a cookie. So, but I can see that in a sense, because it's like it was comforting. But all in all, let me go back a little bit more. So they talk about that, and how like a lot of her friends were white and things like that, and how it's different. And it is, because let's be honest, not saying that you don't have skepticism in every community, you do. But I think in communities where, and I've been in this situation, where you're often the only person of color, you're often, at one hand, you can be eroticized, and on the other hand, you can be exoticized too. You know what I mean? And sometimes we buy into it. I've done it. I'm not gonna lie and say I have, or I haven't. I have. But I think in her case, that's what she did, because I think for her, it didn't matter that these people were having to be white. It mattered that they were family to her. And they were. They really were her family. They became that. Because the one thing, because this documentary, I have to tell you, it was so multi-layered. Because the one thing that I noticed about this was that what Cleo was looking for, was, I think, she wanted to be loved. She wanted to be seen. She wanted to be liked. And she wanted to be validated because when she was young, she wasn't that. She was often the odd woman out. And even when she went to the all girls school, because they showed like her yearbook pictures and stuff, she didn't fit. They even say that she would talk about it and she would like, I didn't fit in. And so Miss Cleo was often the mask that she would wear. And if we really want to get real about it, we all wear masks. Everybody does, myself included. So I can relate to this in a sense because if you know this is what gets you through, you're gonna go with it. Because I can honestly say that for me, when I first moved to where I am now, my present city, I used my being a psychic as my way to make friends, as my way to open up to people. Because quite frankly, I'm actually a very shy, quiet person. I'm not really loud. But if you need me to be, I can be. You know what I mean? So I can relate to that in a sense. So they talk about how eventually her gift became almost too much of a burden because people wanted her to be Cleo, Miss Cleo all the time. And she was like, but I'm not. And they go back into the hotline interview and she's like, but I'm a real person. And she said, I tried to really let people know, like, listen, I didn't, my intention wasn't to help. My intention was to help people. I wasn't here to defraud these people. That was the company, not me. But she said by the time I tried to go and make things right, people already had their opinions of me already sold up. So I couldn't do anything. And in the documentary, in that part of it, she breaks down in tears. She starts crying. And I can understand that too, because unfortunately, and I think especially with the advent of social media, we we're quick to make, to form an opinion without, fleshing it out. So they go towards the end of the documentary, and we get towards the end, and they talk about her battle with cancer. Because as you know, she passed at 53, and she died of cancer of the bone, I believe. And they interview her friends, like her friends, her roommate, everybody. And they were like, we didn't even know she had cancer. We had no clue. And all her friends just wanted to get there and be there for her and see her. And her friend that was her makeup artist, Marianne, no, not Marianne, Andy, um, they had put her in hospice. And her godsons were coming to, the hospital to see her. And Andy was like, no, turn around, go back, turn around. I don't want you to see her like this because she doesn't even recognize you. Like, And she said, I kissed her cheek. I told her that I loved her and that I'm trying not to get emotional. Um, I told her that I loved her. Ooh, I'm trying not to cry. Okay. I told her that I told her that we loved her and that, I know she can feel us and hear us. And that was it. And they were like, no, she was great. And even the people like back in Seattle, that she had run-ins with in the early 90s were like, I now empathize with her because she really did try to help people. And she like, yes, she brought some pain, but she also brought a lot of joy. And for that, I commend her for that. And for me, what I got from the documentary is that we're all complex beings, we're all human, and how dedicated she was to her craft, and how much for me that even now, because like I said, I remember her in high school, and even now, how much of an inspiration she is for me now. If it weren't for people like her, Walter Mercado, there would be, and I say it all the time, there would be no Leo Brown. Because she was the first woman that I saw that made me go, oh my God, that's me. And I will always honor her legacy, honor what she stood for, because I think when she was doing her infomercials, what she did was real. I think anything after that, with like PNR and all that shit, you know, she was just made the fall guy. But it was a really, really good documentary. It was thought provoking. It was funny. It was heartwarming. They had a lot of video clips. They had her do, like at the end, she did poetry. She was a great poet, by the way. And I wish I could find her CDs because I would love to own them. But I loved what she stood for. And I think she was not intentionally trying to help, or excuse me, trying to hurt people. I think she got, like a lot of people do, she got caught up and didn't have the wherewithal to think and look at what this may do. You know what I mean? And when you're wanting to be seen, right? When you're wanting exposure, you don't think of that. You don't think of the long-term effects. That's why you have people who get on reality TV and they're like, I wish I had never done that show. Or I wish I had more say in how that show would go. Because I can tell you right now, the television cycles that we're seeing now, like the Matt Frasers and the Long Island and the Hollywood mediums, they don't have control over their careers. They don't. They don't. I don't care what nobody says. They literally are under a contract. And it was the same way with her. But just imagine what it was for her as a Black woman back then. Just imagine what it is now. But imagine that it was even worse for someone like her. So I commend her for her strength, her intuition, her wisdom, and the fact that she really wanted to truly help people. And I think to frame the way people saw not just psychics, but spirituality. I definitely suggest that you guys check out Call Me Miss Cleo. It's a great documentary. I loved it. I loved it so much I had to watch it twice. I know this video was long, but I thank you guys so much for listening. It really inspired me. Let me know what you think if you watch the video, or like what are your opinions on Miss Cleo? They can be good, bad, or indifferent. It doesn't matter. I just would love to hear your thoughts. So leave them below. And until next time, my sugar bears, I will talk with you very, very soon. Have a great rest of the week, and I'll see you later. Bye bye.